Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour. The first one in, gosh, has it been a year and a half now?
Yeah, I think it was literally like mid-season last year is the last time we did one.
That's insane. That's insane. And you know what? We're back at like the worst time you could come back. We missed a whole 14 win season. All the highs of Sam Darnold, and of course we're coming now at the lows of him. But it feels good to be back. It feels good to be chatting with you. And we'll just kind of pick up where we left off.
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, I think it's probably good. I think that we were out this season for the most part because I think it would have been much more pessimistic than our typical listeners would want me have wanted to be.
sure.
Just given the fact that like I wasn't like the biggest believer in Sam Darnold. Like I love the guy, think everything he did. He did a great job, honestly. Like he did way better than I ever thought he would. But I think I would have been on that bandwagon of like waiting for the other shoe to drop type thing.
Yeah.
And I think the pessimism I would have hated myself for. So I'm glad that that wasn't along the airwaves.
We
Um,
just we wanted to skip that year because we know what the future's all about. And that's
we
what we
do.
really want to talk about. And so that's why we came back now after the season's done. We can talk about the game yesterday, and in future episodes we'll talk about um, prospects and all the fun stuff because I think we really like the off season stuff, maybe more than even in season. That's where we kind of find our groove. So we'll hit that stuff in the coming weeks here. But let's talk about the game last night. When this airs, it'll be 2 nights ago. But damn, dude, 27-9, and it like I feel like it should be like a bigger blowout than that. Like the way the offense looked was just it, it nothing like we had seen all season except for maybe that stretch in Jacksonville and maybe like versus the Titans where like Sam Darnold maybe that was the first showing of like, hey, he's not this perfect quarterback that we're kind of touting him to be. But yeah, what were your thoughts, man? Like it was brutal.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's almost indescribable to literally watch what happened unfold, just given the fact that we obviously saw that a week ago in Detroit, and then to see it, but we never had Sam Darnold be like horrible 2 games in a row. Like,
Yeah.
I guess he did have that rough 3 game stretch mid-season, but for the most part, even in the games that we did lose prior, he played relatively well. It just we lost a shootout to Detroit, and we didn't play all that great in Los Angeles. However, he didn't have a horrible game, missed face mask call, whatever. So to kind of see these two clunkers in a row, I mean, it literally all season it was Sam's not seeing ghosts anymore to the ghost reappeared. So I don't know what happened, but it was really rough. I mean, I know a lot of the talking points are around Sam Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably where my biggest grievances were. I know the offensive line taking a lot of heat as well, deservedly so. But I don't think he helped their numbers with how much he was holding the ball. And then KOC, he's got some of his warts as well throughout the game. So
I think that's the most
ultimately,
disappointing one to me, by the way, is the KOC stuff. Because like I, I I feel like I'm a huge KOC stan. I feel like most people are. They can see the fact that he's probably going to be our head coach for the foreseeable future. Um, but when I was looking at Dan Orlovsky from ESPN today, and he was kind of calling out some of the routes and play calls that Kevin O'Connell had, like they were just really long developing routes. And not to say like again, Sam Darnold is innocent. Like there were definitely easy plays for him to just hit somebody short to intermediate and keep drives alive. Um, but there were some times where it's like you can clearly see that the blitz is getting to you, Kevin O'Connell. And here you have your guys all doing like super long routes. And it just, I don't know, it just, that's twice now, like 2 playoff games where he kind of just loses his mojo. And I don't want to, I want to give him one more shot before I say it's like that's his MO, but I don't know. That was concerning for me to witness because it's like you can be a regular season king, but if you can't do it in the playoffs, what's the point?
Right. And I mean, and you saw some of the success we were having, obviously, moving the ball somewhat early in the game. It was those quick dump off passes. I mean, it was a lot to Aaron Jones or to Cam Akers or to TJ Hawkinson. I mean, I think that's really where we were able to actually move the ball. And then once we kind of got into that position of, hey, we're at the 50, we're just beyond the 50, whatever it is, then we went back to those long developing plays. Like we could have dinked and dunked the whole way.
I know.
I mean, essentially, that's what the Rams are doing. I mean, obviously, they had some big chunk plays here and there to Puka, but for the most part, it was dump off to Higbee. It was a dump off to Parkinson, to the running backs, whoever it was. So I think if we would have kind of followed that a little bit more throughout the game, that would actually help settle Sam down a little bit and give our offensive line a little break.
Well,
So
there's some other things in that game too, where it's like I'm never that person that wants to blame the refs because you play the game. Like, yeah, refs are going to have an impact somehow, but that Stafford incomplete pass, intentional grounding, fumble, like what the hell, man?
I
Like
mean,
that's
I
a
don't
game
even.
changer. Like,
It was a game changer. I don't know how you can just like. I was so furious. I literally was screaming. I think I slammed my hand on like a countertop. I think some chip or some paint chipped off the wall when I did that. So I have to deal with that now. But no, I was really, really frustrated. At worst, you have to call intentional grounding. At worst, now
right?
to me, that wasn't even like a forward pass. Like that was a flip of the wrist, I guess. But like, does that now constitute forward pass? I guess maybe, but at worst, the whole rule of intentional grounding is: are you making a viable attempt to throw the ball to an open receiver? There was no attempt. Like he had no idea where he was going with that ball.
Yeah,
His
his
head was
head was
already in the dirt.
down.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I think to a certain extent, you have to have some sort. And this happened the week before in Detroit too, right? Where Goff threw the ball, but he had no intention of trying to complete a pass. Like he was
Hmm.
just throwing it right at the ground. Just happened to be that Gibbs and whoever was in the vicinity of where
Yeah,
he was throwing it. And same yesterday, he in the vicinity he had Puka. But to me, that's not making a viable attempt to make a completion. So I don't know if the NFL just needs to maybe amend the rules a little. I don't necessarily have a big disagreement with the rule, but I think you have to use some common sense here.
well, that's what the refs lack. It seems like all season when they're playing, or when they're refing our games is that common sense. I tweeted out, I was like, oh, I didn't know that like you could do this and it's not intentional grounding. And I had Rams people in my comments being like, get educated on the game, like read the rules, like Puka's right there. And I'm like, I think if you look at like a very controversial play, the way you can justify if it's correct or not is if like take your team out of it. Like take
Right.
your team out of it. If you think, or just reverse the
Reverse it. Like
teams.
imagine this is happening to your team.
If
Does this
Sam
make sense
Darnold
to
does
yourself?
that, how are you reacting? Because I'm sure you're not saying like, "Oh yeah,
Well,
incomplete
and then
pass."
literally the very next drive was that drive where Sam does a play action, turns around, he has two guys in, and he decides to retreat back. I'm like, throw it at Aaron Jones' feet, like flick it towards his foot. That's good, right? It doesn't matter. He's an
Yeah,
eligible receiver, but obviously Sam didn't do that. So it's frustrating. I think there needs to be some sort of element to this that they're making a viable attempt to complete the pass, not just throwing it at the feet of somebody.
yeah.
It's hey, it's in the air. I don't know. I don't really know. I'm not a rules expert by any means, so I can't, or a legal guy to like write the rule. I just think that there needs to be some sort of, again, common sense to the rule.
It's tough because it's like, I mean, they're calling it in real time, but it wasn't just even like that play where the refs really bothered me. It was the no penalty flag thrown, and then Matt Stafford
And then
convinces the
looking up
guy,
at the video screen
yeah,
and then seeing the face mask, which again, to be fair, it was a face mask. Like
Yeah,
To be fair, they technically made the right call, but if you can't make the right call in real time, then you look up at the screen and see that you missed it and then throw a flag or just call it a penalty.
yeah,
Again, would it have made a difference? Probably not, but it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, where was that week 8 when we
I
lost to the
know.
Rams? Clearly face mask. And you're just like, nope, didn't happen. We had two guys looking straight at him, but it didn't happen. Like,
Yeah, I
just
think the only
frustrating.
play that bothers me the most yesterday is the Stafford one, because I mean you change that into a 10-10 ball game. The Rams defense plays a little bit different. Maybe the Vikings offense is like, all right, we don't have to quite, panic and come back. They can try and do things. But it was just kind of sad to watch too. Like the run game wasn't going yesterday. The Rams, they played physical on our receivers. And I think Detroit kind of showed the rest of the league how to beat us. Be very physical with them and just send pressure towards Sam Darnold. Because even if Sam Darnold like can complete the throw, he's going to get hit because the offensive line is. I mean, they were abysmal yesterday. We've been talking about this since like 2017. Just no interior like offensive linemen. Bradbury had one good year, but others we've been rotating out like Dakota Doziers and Brandles and Reisners
Samias.
and Samias. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's gotta be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, to be fair, I just think that the Rams defensive line's insane. Like, I
It
mean,
is,
even like
and they're young.
perennial high quality player Brian O'Neill was on skates most of the day. So, I mean, give credit to where credit's due, I guess, in that sense. But to a certain extent, it's been rough. It's been really rough. And even you said Bradbury had a good year. He's never ever had a good year in pass protection.
That's
He's
true.
always a pretty good run
That's true.
blocker. Um, and so
And
it's
that one
yes,
year where he caught the pass.
he did catch a pass for like 10 yards. That was nice. But I do think that we really need to address this in the offseason. My biggest thing is obviously going into the future here. And if we have any other talking points on the game last night, we can talk about them still. But you have JJ McCarthy, you have what you hope is your franchise guy going forward, but now you do need to surround him, save that money, that 40 million that or 30 million it's going to cost to have Sam. You use that money to go get one, two, maybe even three guys, at least 1 to 2 guys that can start, and
Yes,
then maybe a third that can compete with like a Bradbury, or if you decide to move on from him, there's actually quite a bit of decent talent in free agency and in the
yeah,
draft,
at the spots
along
where
the
you need it
interior
too.
offensive line. So,
Like it's not even just interior offensive line; it's corner. Um,
oh yeah,
I mean, yeah, you
and
you
it's not
name
like our corner play was horrible this year. It's just everyone's gone. We have no starters outside of Metellus in the secondary um, on roster right now.
Yeah, I forget the tweet I saw today, but I think, I can probably find it in about 2 seconds. Just give me one. Um, it had to talk about like our impending free agents, and obviously, I think everybody knows that we have a lot coming out.
Yeah,
But the Vikings are number one at 45.4%, the most snaps entering unrestricted free agency. I think the whole DB room, sans Josh Metellus, is gone, right? I mean, you could say Blackman doesn't count in that because he's injured and he'll be
yeah, he
back.
didn't
But
play this year at all.
um,
Is Theo Jackson also a free agent? I
can look
guess
it up.
that's
I
the
haven't
only one.
really.
But again, he didn't really play a lot of meaningful snaps. He got in some, but
He looked decent
yeah,
though when he was in there.
no, yeah. I mean, I think that they have high hopes for him. You
He
have
is a
Dwight.
free agent,
He is too. Yeah,
restricted free agent, but he is a free agent.
sure. So we have at least rights
So yeah,
to.
I mean, you are rebuilding your whole secondary. But I was thinking about this today. It kind of stemmed from Nick Miller, his tweet about how Kwesi likes to have his rosters like this, so he can just like quickly move on from people that maybe aren't as good. Um, Maybe this is a good thing because considering Brian Flores may or may not be back next year, you get a new defensive coordinator in here. They might like different types of cornerbacks for that
Mhm.
defensive scheme. I don't know who that's going to be. Maybe they promote from within. Maybe they bring somebody in from the outside. But when you talk about needing a whole new secondary, practically, that could be kind of beneficial if we're trying to spin it in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only way you can try to spin it because otherwise there's a lot to go on. I mean, I was going to ask you this. So obviously one of the big free agents is Pro Bowler Byron Murphy Jr.
Hmm.
Um, Buy or sell on a new contract for him. So he obviously had a lot of flashy interceptions and stuff, but at the same time, he wasn't this all pro cover guy either. I mean,
Sure.
so I think there's
I,
a lot of good and some bad. So it's like, well, how much is that going to cost us after, being tied for like second at the cornerback position in interceptions?
yeah, I get the question. I get where it's coming from because I think I was expecting a little bit more from him when we signed his contract. He was really good last year, by the way. Um, but I think it's difficult because cornerback play, I think, is just hard to find. And even though he may not be all pro like we had maybe thought he'd be, consistency and just his versatility to play inside and outside, like I think that in and of itself is enough reason for me to give him another contract. Um, what is he, 28 now?
At 27, I think, but he'll
Yeah.
be 28 by next season.
Yeah. So I
So
mean,
the
he's
the
still
question
relatively
stems
young.
the question stems from I saw a tweet earlier today of a potential DB room with some free agent signings and stuff. So somebody said, "Hey, let's re-sign Byron. We have Mackay. Let's go get DJ Reed. That's the hot name in the cornerback
Yeah.
market for us." And I'm like, tallest guy's 5'10". I think Mackay's actually 5'11". But I mean, I've always been a big fan of like bigger corners that can be disruptive. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, that doesn't always work either. But I mean, I think DJ's 5'9" or maybe 5'10" if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Byron, I think, is 5'10", 5'11",
Yeah,
and then
you better
Mackay's
hope you don't
5'11".
go up against some 6'3", 6'4" receivers, or you're just gonna get mossed every time.
I mean, yeah, you go against T. Higgins, and it's like, what are you going to do?
Uh, we'll talk about it probably more like in February and stuff. But the corner that I want, I know Miles is a huge DJ Reed guy, but I want Travarius Ward from the
Yeah,
49ers. I mean, he's
yeah,
almost 6'2".
yeah. So he's
Um,
6'1" for sure. I think so.
and he for some reason he's getting phased out in San Fran. I forget who they got that sort of supplanted him, but he's still good this year.
Well, and he had
Um,
a pretty tragic family
that's
situation that
right.
popped up in
That's right.
California. So I just don't think his mind was really in football this
Yeah,
year,
we'll see if it's in football
and he
next year.
is
Yeah.
not going to re-sign there. He said basically because it's still quite traumatic for him and his wife. So hopefully he finds peace and
Yeah.
can find a new situation that would allow him to kind of return back to his very high quality play that he had been in. So.
The question I want to talk to you about, and then we'll, unless we have anything else, we can probably close it out. But the hot button one is Sam Darnold, obviously, right? And you rewind the clock, 15, 20 days, and there were a lot of people like, yeah, we got to lock Sam up, like give him what he wants, trade JJ McCarthy, or just like franchise, like whatever. So because we haven't done a podcast all season, I have no idea really what your Sam Darnold takes are. But I am curious if you are willing to bring him back. Like, and the reason I ask that question is because there's no doubt that his value has decreased in the last 2 weeks. I know, like the sample size of this season, he did great, but the last 2 weeks is what's going to stick in people's mind because it was the most important games of the season, and he just did not show up. Um, so if he's sitting there and you can get him on like a 2 year, I don't know, 55, $60 million contract and maybe even just get out of it after 1 year, and then just ride a quarterback competition with Darnold and McCarthy again. Like, do you roll the dice on that, or are you just done? You just like, you know what? Thank you for your
Um,
time here. It's a loaded question, by the way. I'm expecting a decent response from you, but
so the whole season, obviously, he's been playing quite well. So there was a lot of discourse on Twitter and everything. So I'm sure maybe you saw some of my tweets, maybe not. um, I had no interest in bringing him back, regardless of how well he played. I think the best case scenario for us was he did go on a little playoff run that really increased the value that he could go and fetch. And we did a franchise and trade. That was my ideal scenario, because you look at our draft situation right now,
Yeah,
and we have a first round pick in now 24 overall. And then I think late
we don't.
third,
Yeah, it's not
very,
great.
very late third, like pick 100 or something like that. So it's not great. And my ideal scenario was, okay, somebody's going to want to be willing to give up a second or a couple thirds or whatever for the right to pay him whatever they're going to pay him. Hopefully he was going to get a bag, right? And now, with the way he played, I don't necessarily think that is out of the equation. I
Hmm.
still think that might still be a possibility, because somebody still is going to be wanting, there's enough teams that need a quarterback. He showed well enough that he could play well. There's coaches have egos, so they're going to say, hey, I can get the very, very best out of him, right?
Yeah,
So I still think that that's still an option, but rather than it being a first or a second, was kind of the best case scenario. I think the best case scenario is a third now, which is still fine, because a third now is better than a compensatory third in 2026.
yeah,
Plus, we're going to have to spend a lot this year in free agency. So there is a good chance that we won't be able to be awarded a compensatory pick, just given the fact that there's so many free agents we're likely going to have to sign. So my answer was, it doesn't matter if he would have even brought us to the Super Bowl. It was always sign and trade, or
yeah.
like a franchise and trade. And the reason why is, I don't think Sam Darnold is I don't think the success of Sam Darnold was him. Like, it was, obviously he has to perform, but I think KOC has a great way about not only motivating and uplifting his team, but also scheming well. Obviously, his last two games are not
Yeah,
considered in
a
that, but
little bit of
outside
a
of that,
disappointment.
he can scheme to allow his quarterback to play super well. And my thought process was, if he can do it with a third round bust or third overall pick bust in Sam Darnold, we have a 6 year younger JJ McCarthy sitting here waiting to go, oozing with
Arguably
abilities,
better
oozing with
traits.
talent. He has the mental capacity in the big games. We've seen it in college. Um, and we have him on in for cheap. So why waste 40 million
Yeah,
of cap space? Or obviously it's not going to be 40 million. It'd be like 20 and with some void years or whatever. But why waste the cap space when we can go get, again, I know there's a lot of hot names, right? But like Trey Smith is the biggest name or whatever. But like,
sure.
we can go get some like very competent interior linemen, go get a cornerback, maybe go get Javon Holland, if especially if Flores stays. He played
Yeah,
really well under Flores. Milton Williams. I mean, there's so many names we'll get into later in the future episodes, but get into building around him and
yes.
building this team out for long-term success for the next 4 or 5 years. That has
Yeah.
always been my take. What was yours?
I was very, very much in the same camp of like, I don't even care. I don't even care if he wins us a Super Bowl. Like this this whole season is house money. And however far you take us, I'm gonna thank you when you're done. I'll come to your house, I'll pack your bags, and we'll have a big old celebration. Thank you. And out the door. My only regret, and Kwesi's done this with some other contracts. Um, I sort of wish they would have done a 2-year deal, like back when they originally signed him, instead of just the 1 year 10, like do the 220 or something like that. Like, because then you don't really have to deal with this, right? Like you move into the next season. It's not an off season topic that's no doubt gonna get just overspoken about until we find out what March 5th or whatever it is, March 5th or 6th, when free agency opens. But actually, I think that's the franchise tag deadline. So yeah, I'm pretty much out on it. Um, I'm convinced that the Vikings are in the tag and trade camp. Like, and I don't think they care what pick they get. Like, they'll negotiate. They'll move them for a fifth. Like, I don't think they care.
Yeah, and,
Um,
and like, what's sad about it is you almost have to. because of our current free agent situation. Like our current team construction, like we have so many openings
Yeah.
that we're gonna have to bring in free agents, and we're likely not gonna get any compensatory picks for 26.
Yeah. Yeah. I know if Miles were here, he'd be razzing me a little bit because I was like, they'd trade him for a fifth, and Miles would come in with the level head and be like, they wouldn't trade him for a fifth because they could get a third round comp pick for him the next year. But I actually don't know if they could get a third round comp because if they go after like a Trey Smith, maybe those cancel out.
Well, and again, but like it goes on how many free agents you sign that are eligible, like that are fall into the formula or whatever,
Sure.
right? So,
Which we have a
and
ton.
with the amount of needs we have, and we don't have enough guys that are likely going to get signed for those thresholds, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
we have Cam Bynum, he'll hopefully get a payday. Byron Murphy, if we decide not to, but if we don't sign him, we got to go sign somebody else.
Hmm.
So it just puts us in a weird spot. I mean, unless we do re-sign a bunch of these guys to run it back, but at that point, it's like, are we overpaying guys that are
Yeah.
like, no offense to some of these guys, I just don't know if everyone's worth the money that they're likely going to get in the open market.
Totally agree. Totally
So,
agree. And we got, if anything, this offseason is going to be chaotic, right? When we got all the free agents we need to get, limited draft capital, but tons of good prospects, especially at the positions that we need. So I think in the future weeks here, we'll really hit home. I know our DM's already going a little crazy on some prospects, so we'll make
oh
sure to get
yeah,
some guests. I already have Thor Nystrom locked up. We just have to pin down a date, but we'll kick. Like I said, we're back, and
we're back.
we're gonna kick it off real good. So this episode will be airing on Wednesday. On Thursday, we're gonna get a little new element to Vikings Happy Hour. We got a new person. His name's Jack, and he's gonna do some all 22 film breakdown for us this year. He's gonna look back at the Vikings Rams game and kind of give a glimpse as to what kind of went wrong. And then moving forward, we'll maybe look at some draft prospects there in an all 22 perspective. So that'll be a great little feature. And then as far as shows go each week, we'll be here. I don't think we'll be doing live shows. Life is busy. That's why we took a year and a half off. But we're excited to talk about the future of the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, JJ McCarthy, and we just want to hear from you guys. So hop in the comments, like and subscribe. And until next time, Skol Vikes.